afternoon and welcome. To those of you who are just joining us, we're hanging out just for a moment to allow for everyone to go ahead and get connected. Numbers are climbing here. We'll just give everyone one more moment. All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the digital version of our Elevate Career series, Elevate Career Hacks Online. We have a great set of panelists and experts joining us today. They're going to work with us on developing the skills and finding the right resources to maintain our well-being in the workplace, whatever that might look like in these current times. Before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. First off, everyone in this session will be muted. So if you have questions or you'd like to speak to the panel, please feel free to do that by using your Q&A function in the toolbars. Secondly, if you have any technical challenges, we have 3 alumni staff members present here today that are willing to help you and assist in the ways that we can. And speaking of those alumni staff, I'd like to give a quick thank you and a shout out to my 2 wonderful colleagues who are joining us today, worked in conjunction on this Career Hacks program that you've been seeing over the last month. So a huge thank you to Josh Prue, our Director of Alumni Engagement, and Alyssa Kelly, the Director of Alumni Relations for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So jumping in today to our program, our hope today is that whatever your current workspace is looking like or what your work-life balance is turning out to be, we're hoping that you're going to gain some insight into the ways that you can make sure that taking care of yourself is one of your top priorities. We're finding that in stressful times, this is something that's often lost and sometimes really considered a luxury. Today, we hope to share with you some realistic tools that will help you maintain your well-being and make sure that you're functioning at your best level possible. So as I mentioned earlier, we have some fantastic alumni panelists joining us today. They're working in various areas that relate to wellness and professionalism and wellness in the corporate environment. So first, we have AYANA FRIERSON. She is a corporate health and wellness coach. We also have Kelly Jones, who is a sports dietitian and nutrition communications consultant. And we also have SARA TARCA, who is a well-being strategy consultant. So Sarah is also our moderator for today. So without further ado, Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you to do some in-depth introductions and take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm excited. I just love this series, the Elevate Career Hacks Online. It's really kind of what I call turning obstacles into opportunities, right? We are in some new environments, and this opportunity to keep learning and keep growing is really important. So I am joined today by a couple of other experts in the health and well-being field. Before we jump in, I want to give you an opportunity to get to know us just a little bit better. So I'll give a little more detail on what I do, and then I will ask both AYANA and Kelly to do the same. So my role, as Kate mentioned, as a well-being strategy consultant, I work for OneDigital Health and Benefits. And in the past, I've worked as a personal trainer. So I've been on the clinician side. I've worked for an insurance company. I've also been a health educator and a smoking cessation facilitator. So today my role is really more working with individuals and organizations to use well-being as really a jumping off point and as a tool for empowering organizations and individuals to really enhance well-being, performance, and engagement. So a lot rolled into that, but it is a fun job and I'm never bored, I can tell you that. I want to share a couple thoughts on what self-care and well-being means to me. And it's really about being open to change and prioritizing my own health. Especially getting used to, this aging environment, new environments, just being open to that so that, every day I'm hopefully a little bit better than I was the day before. Also, for all of you to maybe be thinking about this question as well, what are some of the challenging issues that we're dealing with respect to balancing self-care? And I think, again, for me, it's a lot about pivoting. That's a tough thing for a lot of us to do, is to continually pivot. An example for myself is that, I thought I'd be an empty nester right now. And instead I have 3 adult children who have moved back home. And it's a little different. I'm sure many of you can relate. So that's where we're headed today. We want to talk about all this and talk about well-being as an opportunity. And hopefully we can give you some good resources for that and an opportunity to kind of engage with us as we go. I am going to hand it off to AYANA to ask her to give us a little bit of her background.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. Again, my name is AYANA. I am currently, I've transitioned from teaching yoga full-time from, I want to say 2017 until the beginning of 2020. So I was a group fitness instructor, and that was birthed from finding a place of relief from being a corporate employee. So I was working in advertising and in marketing, which can be very high demand, stressful environment. So my outlet was yoga and fitness. And through actual training, attaining certifications, I decided that I would then transition to teaching others how to do the same thing, to use these practices for themselves or the betterment of themselves. Then the pandemic hit and I had to make a shift. Especially living here in New York City, we are not allowed to have group fitness classes. And so I decided to draw my attention to corporate wellness, which is something that I had some experience with. But through some connections that I had, I decided to take it on full time. So now my focus and my goal is to help employees in businesses to become more mindful, to help them with movement if needed, but also to allow them to release some of that stress and the burden they may be feeling, especially with the challenges that we are faced with in today's world. So I am working in wellness. I am still working in fitness and with yoga, and also showing people more about how to care for themselves in different and small ways that people may not be aware of. So that is the gist of everything that I am doing in today's world. And I will pass it off to Kelly now.
Hey, Kelly.
Happy to be here. I am a board certified sports dietitian, and my master's, while I obviously focus in nutrition, my master's work was in exercise physiology. And out of school, I actually went on to be a professor and taught nutrition and sports nutrition to nursing students and exercise science students. And from there, I transitioned after about 8 years into my own practice. So I had a little bit of a flexible schedule, was able to start building my sports nutrition business on the side. And then after doing some media work locally, I'm outside of Philadelphia, I started to pick up a little bit more on nutrition communications and media work too. So right now, my time really is split in my own business, working as a fitness and sports nutrition expert with teams and athletes at every level from high school to professional, but also just the average person who wants to be more active. And then on the other side, again, media and nutrition communication. So consulting for organizations like the Blueberry Council and Cliff Bar, and making sure that the nutrition information that they're providing to consumers and any claims that they're making are in line with science and are also practical and not deceiving. So that's very important to me as a professional, that consumers and, the American public are getting credible information that isn't, sounding a little crazy, that isn't too trendy, and that you can actually apply to your life without it being, some crazy new thing that you're trying to implement. So that kind of ties into my ideas on wellness and self-care too. I think that they're so individualized, and what wellness looks like to the three of us that are on this panel may be different for all of you. And because we work with so many people, we can help individuals find, different ways to test it out with trial and error. So, like Sarah said, you need to be able to pivot. So, self-care and wellness should also be ever changing to me. And I try to help people recognize that need for change and flexibility. So whether it's flexibility seasonally, flexibility from real life to a pandemic real life, or it's just, daily flexibility of I woke up and you know what, today's workout's not going to work out. And this is what's going to serve me better instead. I think is all pretty important. So mental health is a big part of my philosophy, even though it sounds like a lot of what I focus on is the physical.
Excellent. Yeah, and I hope what all of you got out of that is that you heard from 3 different, well-being experts, right? And yet, as Kelly just pointed out, it's different for each of us, and I know it's different for each of you. And along that lines of kind of getting comfortable with maybe some new tools, new techniques, and embracing a mindset that's going to kind of keep us open to these discussions today, we're going to have AYANA take us through just a simple breathing exercise to hopefully, set our intention. So I am going to hand it off to her, and then we are going to dive right in. But let's take a moment and kind of get our minds open to our resources and the information for today. So AYANA, I'll let you lead this one.
All right, great. So I do ask that everyone be seated at this time. You can stay in a chair, of course, but find yourself in a comfortable place and sit up nice and tall. Right, so this will be a brief breathing exercise. And this is just meant to give us a little bit more relaxation and comfort within our bodies. And the breath is very important and can be used as a tool to do so. So you can place your hands on your thighs, your knees. And if you'd like to, you can keep the eyes open, or maybe you close them. And I ask that from here, you start to tune into your breath a little bit more, become more mindful or aware of your breathing. Breathing is something that we do without even thinking about it. But once you start to become aware of your inhales and of your exhales, you'll notice the different sensations or the different effects that each action brings into and releases from your body. So taking a deep breath in through the nose and releasing all of the air out of your body nice and slow. And once more, breathing in through the nose, fill the lungs, and breathing out completely, and start to feel the body, the muscles soften. And as you continue on, becoming even more aware of how your body is feeling, allowing yourself to remain present and focused. And so in the next moment, we'll begin with a breathing exercise. We're counting and inhaling, counting and exhaling. And so I'll lead us through here. Inhaling to a count of 4, and then exhaling to a count of 4. So as you breathe in, we'll count 4, 3, 2, 1, hold and release. 2, 3, 4. So once again, breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold it and release. 2, 3, 4. One last time, inhaling for 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. 2, 3, and 4. And you can resume your normal breathing pattern from here. Noticing again the sensations that the breath holds or brings into the body. And staying present as we continue on throughout our session together. If your eyes were closed, you can start to gently peel the eyelids back. And now we're back. All right, so I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah so that we can begin.
Thank you. Great. And for those of you that are saying, geez, that was great. And, why does it feel so good? There's some research by Ariana Huffington and Thrive Global. They do a lot of work with regard to personal well-being. And one of these opportunities that we have in our current environment is to take these resets. And that's actually what she terms it. And I think a lot of us can relate to that if we can just slow things down for a moment and take some time. As you just saw, it didn't take much time for us to do that breathing exercise, whether you do this at the beginning of your day or at the end of the day, or during, a few times throughout the day, to just reset and center yourself. It really can provide a physically calming effect, a mentally calming effect, and there's a lot of research, a lot of science behind it that shows it does help us to improve our focus. So now that we are focused and ready to go, let's talk a little bit about some of these emerging challenges. We know we've come through a very challenging time. As a matter of fact, many Americans, about 70% of Americans, are saying that this has been the most challenging time of their careers, even when compared to other economic downturns or other true crisis situations, environments like post 9/11 and that type of thing. So make no bones about it, this has been challenging. We're stuck inside. We've been, working in an environment that might include our family members, our kids, our pets, spouses, friends, extended family that may be now in a living environment with us. So, we know that this can be affecting our overall health and well-being. So I'm going to throw this to AYANA and ask you, really, as a health and well-being person, a professional, what are some of these real deterrents that we're seeing in this environment? And potentially, what kinds of solutions do you see?
Yeah, so what I'm finding as I continue to work with different businesses is that there are a number of challenges. I've worked with a business recently, actually, that it was almost an emergency to have a wellness expert come in and facilitate a session because someone had an actual breakdown. And so what we're seeing is these high stress levels that are occurring. Some people feel like, they can't get a break from work anymore. There's certainly a different amount of pressure in terms of vacation, where can you go, that you won't be, you won't be considered a threat, or that you won't, potentially contract the virus. Will I, be allowed to take the time off? These are some of the things that people feel that they're coming up against in this new normal. And then also too, there's other factors. People have kids, and in some areas, kids aren't, allowed to go to the schools, and so they're keeping the kids home. And now that's an added challenge with trying to balance parenting and making sure that your children are served, if they are taking educational measures online, and then also to being present in your new normal space.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think we also have an opportunity to do a poll. So I know for many of you that are attending today, let's try to find out a little bit about where you're at, because what AYANA has just been saying is that we know there's all kinds of environments right now. So you have an opportunity here to just tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then that way Kelly, AYANA, and I can maybe kind of guide our conversation here, towards our audience. So go ahead and check the box that you would have on the screen in front of you, and let us know in the chat if you have questions on that. And while we're giving a minute or so for folks to do that, maybe we can also just throw out there that we know there's also returning to work, right? So it might be a combination of where folks had been at home 100%, even some folks that really never left their work environment. So we have this, what I call a collision of environments where, we don't have that definitive work environment, work schedule, home schedule anymore. So AYANA, do you want to comment? Are you seeing any, do we have any results there on the screen?
Let's see. I don't see any results unless I'm looking at
there we go. Yep. Takes a minute there. And Kelly, also feel free to chime in, if there's anything here that stands out for you. So, well, looks like 66% of you are working from home. And then about, 10, 20, 30% that are in a little bit of a mixed environment. Okay, so we do still have a lot of folks working from home. That brings up, I think a lot of us have heard the term the COVID-19, right? There are folks that have been maybe sitting a little bit more, have maybe been running, or maybe your workspace is in the kitchen, which makes it really convenient to kind of grab a snack or grab lunch. But, Kelly, let's talk a little bit about maybe stress eating or pandemic eating, whatever we want to call it. Let's talk about that, and how do we eat for productivity and performance, and not for just the comfort and the stress that we're feeling.
Yeah, for me, it's important that we do balance both, that we don't, get too caught up in, oh, I shouldn't be eating this because I just saw a headline about the COVID-19 or the COVID-15 when they're comparing it to freshman 15. I think that we need to allow ourselves that. And for some people, finding comfort in food might be the only thing that day that they're able to find comfort in. There's so many stressors we're all dealing with right now. And if we just add more stress about feeling guilty about food, that's not going to help your immune system. It's not going to help your productivity or your physical or mental health. So we really do need to give ourselves a break. Having said that, I think that it's important that while you are finding joy in those foods, whether it be, chocolate, or you're baking cookies more often, or you're just ordering takeout from, one of your favorite local restaurants and trying to support that too, that there is some consistency in what you're doing. So when we're thinking about, and, my slogan used to be optimally fueling your body and mind. That's what I want to help people do, right? Feel good physically and mentally. And there's so many connections between fueling your body well and your productivity, your mood, and your mental state. So it's really important that you wake up and you start your day feeding yourself. A lot of people have this all or nothing mentality, and whether it's a pandemic or not, when people are trying to be healthy, which usually gets just thrown into lose weight, unfortunately, when people are trying to get healthier, they automatically wake up and they're feeling motivated and they think they have this willpower, and they have a tiny breakfast and then this small lunch, and then by the end of the day, you're going overboard, right? And this is just a theme that I see over and over. I think many dietitians do. I think many people tuning in right now can probably relate to. And if it's not on a daily basis, that restrict, overeat type of cycle, a lot of times it's on a weekly basis. So I also like to tell people, if you feel like you need a cheat day, you're being too restrictive the rest of the week, right? So we want to find those consistencies in our eating pattern where we feed ourselves and we feel good from the get-go, so that your brain and your body have the energy they need to do what they need to do. And then we set up these moments of self-care throughout the day, where self-care is just basic needs, right? Self-care doesn't have to be these grand gestures that are kind of glorified in the media, social media, wherever you're spending your time, comparing yourself to others maybe. And they can just be these small acts of taking care of yourself. So, if you woke up and you did give yourself a balanced, nourishing meal, well, when should you be eating again? So I think that's what a lot of people have fallen into working from home right now, is that there's not a, specific break. I know for my husband, on the days that he's working from home, he's split in the office and home, he's dealing with, oh, well, I set up all these calls and I thought at home it would be easier because I didn't have my commute time. And then it's 2:00 and he hasn't had lunch yet. So, even living with a dietitian, he's, having issues with that too. So try to find time in your schedule schedule, reschedule, this is my lunchtime. Or if you notice that by lunch you're always starving, you need to plan for a snack earlier, because again, that's not going to help your productivity, your mood. And then what do you do when you feel overly hungry? You're more likely to make an unreasonable decision about what you're going to eat, right? So by having this as part of your routine, as part of your schedule, by having some go-to standard meals that you know are nourishing, but also taste good to you and are physically satisfying, then it makes it a lot easier, even on those busy days, that you have those options available. I try to, again, just put it out there for people to build a balanced meal. And I know that we could get into a lot more nutrition science than we have time for. You want to look at, do I have a nourishing carbohydrate that's going to give me fiber that helps to promote fullness and support your gut health and immune system? Do I have something colorful there that's maybe a fruit or a vegetable that provides me with more antioxidants, that looks good because we eat with our eyes? And then do I have a protein and then healthy fat and flavor? Those are really kind of your checklist at any time of day when you're hungry and need to nourish yourself. And then it helps with the, mindless snacking everyone talks about, because if you actually feel full and satisfied physically and mentally from food, then you're going to be less likely to be picking at things, right? So just, those are kind of my main tips, is be less hard on yourself, but have some sort of a routine too.
Yeah, and I think you just touched on an area, and I want to come back to self-care, because we actually had a question in the chat about the term self-care. So let's table that for just a second. But AYANA, Kelly just mentioned, focusing on, what we're eating. Is there a mindfulness aspect to this? And I guess I want to pull back in the physical activity or the yoga and the relaxation exercises as well. But what about the mindfulness aspect? I mean, you saw earlier, we had 66% of our audience here that is in a home environment. And I can attest to all of the things that Kelly just said. We could go on for a long time. What about mindfulness? How does that relate to this?
Yeah, so mindfulness can definitely help in terms of being in the home and eating. I think Kelly mentioned this sort of eating without, thinking. And when you put the mindful aspect into it, what you're really doing is considering what you're actually about to do. Just like at the top of our time together today, when we became more mindful of our breath and we started to notice how we were feeling when we were breathing in, breathing out, the same thing can apply to when you're eating. So just taking into consideration, it's lunch hour. When you sit down with your meal, it's helpful to actually sit with that food that you're consuming and really notice the textures of it and how it feels to take that in. Will actually help you to decide if I'm still hungry, right? So this will also require you to slow down when you're eating. I know for me, I have this bad habit of just like gobbling everything down. But when you slow things down and you take your time with it and really investigate it, becoming more mindful, then there's more of a purpose to it. And so you have, that aspect of it, but also too, there's the going to get food, right? Or grocery shopping. I think there's another layer of mindfulness to that, actually planning out what it is that you're going to have with you in the house. So again, as Kelly mentioned, you don't want it to be, whether it's just all vegetables and, all these strict things in your diet. That's not really fun, because then you're going to binge when it comes to, these cheat meals. And then also too, you want to make sure that the things that you are getting aren't, on the other end of it, where it's just a bunch of bad, foods and things that over time you start to feel a little guilty or a little more guilty than you should about eating. So becoming more mindful when you're going to get groceries. Maybe that means making a list. Maybe that means taking more time at the grocery store, going down each aisle and figuring out what it is that you're going to want to eat. Because sometimes we get things with a grand idea that, okay, this is what I want to eat, this is what I should be eating, but then you're not going to eat it. So, taking that time for yourself in the grocery store, I think, is just as important as taking the time to sit and eat the meal and figure out if you're hungry, if you're not hungry. And then to also the physical aspect, you will need the food to fuel yourself, whether you're doing yoga or doing any other physical activity, maybe an online virtual class, or you're going to the gym if, your state allows it. So again, don't be ashamed. You need to fuel yourself. And this physical fitness, whether it is yoga or even taking a break and going out for a walk, is all part of self-care tactics that I know we want to jump into. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. So really great points. And again, think about this, we all know too that the grocery store, it can be both a temptation and a great opportunity for us. And in this environment, we know many of us aren't going to the grocery store. So think about this, I really want to come back to this idea of turning this challenge into opportunity. So and this is part of a growth mindset, where this challenge of maybe you aren't going to the grocery store, but what an opportunity to make your list, to be mindful about what it is that maybe you're checking off for curbside pickup or delivery. But that way you don't have to go into the grocery store. You can take pride in the fact that, geez, I'm being more mindful about what it is I'm going to be bringing into my home and having available. But this is all part of historically what we've called self-care. And we had a comment in the chat that, there's been kind of, whether it's a movement or discussion about not using the term self-care, and, has this kind of already exceeded its shelf life. So I'm going to put us all on the spot a little bit and say, if we had to come up with, another term for self-care that maybe was a little bit more relevant or current. Do either of you have a thought on that? I know I kind of think of it's really empowerment, right? It's self-empowerment, because I truly believe that well-being is the missing link. It is an opportunity. It is a privilege to kind of be able to treat ourselves well because of the productivity and the feel-good factor. So I would go with empowerment, personal empowerment. But do either of you have a thought on that? And I know this was off script, so any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw that in the panel discussion too, and I think it's a fantastic thing to bring up. And I don't think that it's just self-care. I also think it's wellness. I also think it's just being healthy, right? So while I do actually really love, I think, self-empowerment is maybe the best way to take it. I think that the more a word gets used or seems to be overused or gets a halo over it of it has to look a certain way, the more we feel that overwhelming responsibility or feel a little intimidated by it. So I think that for me, and I, work with this with clients a lot with the word healthy and even wellness, is that we need to take back these words and let them be different for everybody. So kind of like I said in my intro, wellness should look different for everyone. And if we can accept that our idea of wellness and our idea of self-care is different than the person next to us, is different than our coworker or our friend, or again, whoever we're comparing ourselves to in this digital world that we live in, then those words can again feel more meaningful and less intimidating to us too. So I'm all about, taking back what we want these terms to mean to us and finding what that really is for you. Even when you look at things like a specific ideal body weight and things of that nature, there's no specific weight that everyone should be at a certain height. So we need to find what's the healthiest or best weight for you, just like we need to find all these different levels of holistic self-care for ourselves too. So I think it's more about, just taking back the word and making it more flexible.
Right. Yep. Good point. AYANA, I want to give you a chance to chime in.
Yeah, I think both of you guys hit the nail on the head. Sarah calling it self-empowerment, I think is actually a much better term. And to your point, Kelly, I think self-care in itself has become just a term that maybe pop culture has sort of taken and run with it. And now, there's this sort of idea that may not be realistic to one particular, person. It's going to look different depending on who you are and what you like. Like self-care isn't just going to get your nails done or going to the spa. Self-care could be as simple as going for a walk every day. It could be getting plants, right? It could be, I love plants. Or, it could be playing the guitar, something that makes you feel like you're sort of taking care of yourself, rejuvenating yourself, or pouring love into yourself, doing something that you love, I think is really what it comes down to when you are practicing self-care or self-empowerment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for that. I think this is a really good lead-in to our next section, which is really about balancing the care and balancing these environments that we're in. When we talk about really empowering ourselves or self-care or whatever term we want to use, I really think we need to open up the lines of communication to our stakeholders. And I know many of us are working from home and you don't necessarily think about your family members as the stakeholders, but think about that for a moment. Try to think about, if you were from an outside perspective looking in, I always tend to think about, a family as an organization, right? Because we all have different roles, but we also all have different needs. And when we have had this collision of work and home life, we really all become stakeholders, and we all have a vested interest in how the others are feeling, how they're performing, and are we meeting the needs and the values of our family members and coworkers, that we're interacting with. So when we talk, I think about how we can look at that as in a holistic perspective. So as a health and well-being strategist, I encourage you to kind of think about an acronym that I use, which is ASK. So ASK means, first of all, as a stakeholder and looking at your family unit and your co-working unit and these two environments that have collided, you need to first of all assess where you are and what are your goals and objectives. How can we really make progress or be feeling at our best if we don't really understand what's important or where we're starting out? So I always encourage folks to even, whether I'm talking to an employer about their organization or to individuals, really try to assess where you are. And I've been encouraged by a lot of the vendors and the virtual resources that have come about through this pandemic. And one is really amazing that I never used to go to that often, which is the CDC website. And the CDC website has actually done a phenomenal job of really, by topic, organize different types of tools and resources for individuals to go to, free of charge. So these are not things that you would have to pay for. But if you are trying to understand how to move forward with your own personal well-being in this environment, that's one place that I would suggest starting out. And I have some resources that we're going to be sending out as follow-up, from all of us, but this information will be on that resource listing as well. Part of assessing whether you use a vendor tool or, something that you've found online, whether it be a Peloton app or, any type of organizational website or whatnot. The next step would be really seeking out new tools, right? So that's the S in ASK. So you've assessed where you are and maybe what your goals or objectives are, and then you're going to seek out maybe some new tools. And this comes back to my, discussion about a growth mindset. The growth mindset really is about seeking new ways, new apps, new technologies, new communication tools, and they are just prolific right now. And there are some really good solutions in every area of health and well-being, from nutrition to fitness to emotional health, brain science, how to kind of be focused and productive, and also importantly, things that you can share with your family. So if the majority of us on this call today are working from home. What a great opportunity to share these ideas and share some new techniques with family members. And lastly would be know, and know as in KNOW, not know as in no, I won't do it. Knowing your resources. So even though you're working from home, asking your employer what types of resources that you have through your carrier, through your insurance, understanding, the different COVID protocols for when you do return to work. A lot of this is about understanding or feeling less anxiety, because we know that that can actually reduce our stress level, right? If we're feeling anxious or we don't know what's coming, there's a lack of control. And there's a lot of data out there that tells us this lack of control is really what causes increased stress. So the more you know about what you need to do, what your expectations are, the more you're going to feel in control of your environment. Knowing your schedule, knowing what your needs are is really important. So, I think obviously, as an individual right now for myself, I have 3 older children at home, but Kelly, I'm gonna maybe throw this to you and have you talk a little bit about a perspective from a working mom's point of view with a child at home that maybe has some different needs than I do with these big adults living with me. So I'm gonna let you chime in on this idea of balancing and how that impacts our lives and our well-being.
Yeah, I'm a mom of a little bit older than a 2.5-year-old, and I'm pregnant as well during this pandemic, which is definitely different this time around. So, those things considered, during, when you're pregnant, you want to be able to prioritize self-care a little bit more, but then you have, this small child to take care of. And I consider myself very lucky compared to the parents who have 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and they're trying to help them through virtual school while also trying to work at home. So I think that that's probably the toughest area to navigate, and where I'm seeing people struggle a lot. There's data out there that shows that women have been leaving their jobs at a very high rate compared to normal to try to just be home and support other people and their families more. And those are the people that probably need to focus the most on their wellness, because they probably feel like they've given up a big part of themselves. I know for me, I'm lucky enough owning my business and having people that work for me that, I have 3 days a week, my son's in childcare and we keep him home the other couple of days. But, for a while I was scheduling, some calls and things during his naps. And now I know that I shouldn't be doing that either. So, I think that you have to have some sort of a routine set. I think that really helps, especially with younger kids. And I think that both parents need to be on the same page with that routine too, which can be a really big challenge when you're both working. Obviously we have a panel of 3 women too. So I do want any males that are watching right now and maybe dads at home to know that, you're considered and acknowledged as a part of this too, because while it's hard on women, it's also hard on men trying to recognize, maybe if they aren't home all the time, they are the ones going to the office, or, they're struggling with, I have this sort of schedule, but I want to be helping. There's so much, I think, turmoil going on inside of each of us, and there needs to be, better communication across the board for the family unit. So, the K with the know, knowing what others need and how to support one another is really important so that you don't run into problems throughout the day. But I think it's, again, essential that you get up, you have an idea at least of what your day is going to look like. And then there's sort of a plan B. When it comes to, an activity and nutrition perspective, I think that that's helpful ahead of time to plan too. It was mentioned earlier, having a plan for your meals for the week. And that doesn't have to be that you have all these recipes set up and that you know exactly what you're going to be eating at every meal, but having those components of meals, like I mentioned before, that you can throw together, having pantry and freezer staples for when you can't make it to the grocery store, or you, have not had the opportunity to hop online and do a full, shopping trip that way, and getting your kids involved in those sort of things too, no matter what age they are. So if you have younger kids, even like mine at 2.5 years old, I have him, we have this little learning tower in the kitchen, and I'm like, stir that while I'm doing this. And sometimes it makes more of a mess, but I know that in the future, that's going to help me out a little bit. If you have older kids, what responsibilities can they take? Maybe it's having them pick, what vegetable you're going to eat that night. And that's one less thing for you to think about. And then for, people with older kids at home, or if it's just you and a spouse, or you're living with roommates, collaborative meal planning, I think, is so helpful, where you can look at the week ahead and just, it sounds crazy that just deciding what you're going to have for dinner can be so stressful, but it gets so stressful. So, looking ahead at your week and saying, okay, you pick 2 meals, and you decide where we're going to order out from one night. And that alone can take the stress down. And then you can kind of divvy up who's going to prep what. So, working together, communicating together is going to keep everybody fed well, more calm. And again, having those plan Bs always helps you kind of feel like you're at least staying on track a little bit without going crazy. And then some days you just need to accept that you're going to go crazy, but being able to get back on track the next day is what's really important.
Great points. And I think the interaction of, you might have had, your spouse might have been working somewhere, or, now with 2 people working potentially in many of these environments, and all of a sudden you see a different side to a family member that you never saw before. You weren't exposed to their work environment. I had a coworker who said, geez, my husband is a circle back on that kind of guy. She had never heard that term before, that, I never knew about circle back on that, but they were listening in on each other's phone calls. So you've heard this whole different persona. And then now you throw potentially, kids in there as well, and everyone has different needs. And so I think it's really important, that framework, the structure. Those were excellent points. We had another question here in the chat that was about, kind of some online yoga recommendations and things. And I don't want to wrap up too quickly here, because we do want to also give additional chances for questions to come in. But we did have that one. So AYANA, as far as kind of this idea or a way to kind of help balance, we've talked about mindfulness, are there good yoga streaming services? Do you feel that it's better that someone, wait until they can go somewhere? Or have you found, are there yoga streaming services that you can recommend?
Me personally, I'm a yoga instructor, so I haven't.
Yeah. I don't want you to have to send them to a competitor.
I haven't spent too much time, to be honest, investing in streaming services. But what I can say is a lot of people, if you were going to a studio before and the group classes aren't available, I see that some studios are now offering services online.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've seen that too.
Yeah, so if you were attached to a studio before, check in with them and see whether they're on Instagram or Facebook, and see what their offerings are, because more often than not, a lot of them have extended their services in the virtual space, as well as your favorite instructor. You may have had an instructor who you really loved and were attached to. If you're on their email list, try and get in touch with them that way, as well as again, searching them out on social media to see what their offerings are.
Yeah.
Other than that, my favorite that I would recommend, which is actually free, is Yoga with Adrienne on YouTube.
Oh, I love, yes, I've done that one too. Yeah. Yeah, I can recommend that too.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah, she's great. Check it out.
Okay.
And yeah.
Good. Well, I hope that answered the question that someone had put in there. And I know we are bumping up against time. So just a reminder that there will be some resources coming out to you. So some of the recommendations that we've made, we'll make sure to get those in there. But Elisa from UConn has also joined the screen here. And I think if there are any questions that you can bring up, or those that we should be answering, is there anything else before we kind of wrap up?
Thanks, Sarah, Kelly, and AYANA. This has been great so far. I'm already feeling so much lighter, and I've taken
good.
I'm popping on screen to help facilitate our audience Q&A. So we have one question so far, but this is a reminder: use that Q&A on your toolbar and send some. So this is a great question, and love for each of you to answer from your perspectives. Can you speak to some better ways to emotionally support adult family members affected by COVID? Their emotional challenges, job loss, potentially working with at-risk care, and working with COVID patients, you know, really takes a lot of stress and mental.
Mine was cutting out just a little bit on the question, but I think I got the gist of it. I'll just repeat it as far as how do we support adults with some mental health needs and just the stresses of healthcare workers. You know, it's been a lot. You know, we had some loneliness issues prior to the pandemic. Mental health support was needed by many folks in the US and across the globe. So, you know, one thing that I would encourage people to do, first of all, is look at if they do have coverage through their employer. For example, Cigna, which is just one employer that I work with, works with Happify. So there are a lot of resources through apps and through counseling that are really promoted through your insurance carrier. So first of all, you know, if you have that coverage. And second of all, you know, really there are mental health assessments, and you know, this can just be, it can be anxiety, it can be stress. This does not have to be a clinical diagnosis it's good to reach out for support before you hit a crisis situation. So I would really encourage folks to look at their resources that they have available, but also, you know, I have some resources that are actually listed in some of the follow-up materials, but I want to give Kelly and AYANA a chance to chime in as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, mental health care should be for everyone. So like you said, you don't have to have clinical anxiety or a mental breakdown to seek out therapy. You know, I wish it was covered more widely by all insurance, but you know, if you don't have that available to you, or let's say that this is a situation where you don't feel comfortable recommending that to your family member, because some people do still associate a stigma to it or might feel attacked by it, you know, just try to be as empathetic as you can to their situation, put yourself in their shoes and see the things that might help make them feel a little bit better. So if you do have the opportunity and the time, let's say, to help throw snacks together or prepare breakfast, or, you know, if that's overnight oats that you're throwing together and saying, hey, grab that on your way out the door so that they're starting their day fueled a little bit better, and having, you know, a meal that they really like once a week prepared, that can sometimes mean all the difference in the world. And it's not just from someone's caring for me perspective, but also, you know, when our blood sugar gets too low from either not eating enough, not having balanced meals, that releases more stress and anxiety hormones like cortisol and epinephrine. So, you know, just maybe helping them pull those things together can be a gentle reminder that that's something they should be doing to take care of themselves. And then outside of that, maybe, you know, having some sort of family activities. Again, I know that depending on where you live, it can be hard to get outside and do things, but what are family or couple, or, you know, just the two of you, things that you can do that are a little bit more active or can get their mind off of whatever is going on, whether it's that someone close to them has COVID or they're a healthcare worker or they've lost their job, whatever that might be. What are things that could spark a little bit of joy that you can kind of schedule for the week or invite them to do at least?
Yeah. And AYANA, did you have a comment on that as well?
Yeah, really briefly, I just wanted to touch on this from the mindful aspect of it, and really talk about what it is to have a routine and a ritual for yourself. I think that's really important, especially when you have these outside factors that, you know, sort of creep into your life, whether it is the fact that someone may have lost their job, whether they have been infected with COVID or recovering, or someone close to them has the disease. So there's a number of different things people could be dealing with. But when you do have an actual routine or a ritual set up for yourself, you can sort of combat these outside forces just to help yourself feel maybe a little bit more safer, more comfortable, and sharing these things with, you know, others who you know are affected, you know, could be beneficial. So when we talk about a ritual, it's something that you do that has meaning or purpose behind it. So a routine could be waking up and having, or taking a shower at 7 a.m. A ritual would be waking up, taking that shower, but maybe you're singing, you know, a personal song to yourself in the shower, right? These are things that, again, pour love into yourself and provide that much needed care, especially in these times.
Excellent. And I think we're bumping up against time. I see Kate. I feel like we could go on another hour or so, but we won't. There's so much to this topic. So thank you both for all of your information. And I'm going to hand it back to Kate just to close us out.
Definitely. Thank you, Sarah. And just to sort of echo what you said, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Your expertise has been a huge help in these stressful times, and I appreciate all of you who joined us today and your thoughtful questions, both in the chat and in the Q&A. So before we go, I just want to let you know two things. That A, we will be sharing some of these resources that we've discussed today. So no worries if you didn't copy everything down by notes. We'll be sending it out to you via email. And also just a heads up to be looking forward for our next section in this series. Will be taking place in February when we have our annual Elevate Career Month. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have some fantastic panels covering everything from sports and entertainment to healthcare to emerging technologies in the business field, as well as some like the social sector and nonprofit organizations. So a lot of great stuff to come. Please keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, thank you again to our fantastic panelists for joining us. And I hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season and stay well. Take care of yourselves. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.